Hello, driver ed students. This is Mr. Calhoun. We're going to talk about driving on the expressway today. I hope everyone's doing well. This is chapter 16 if you want to follow along in your textbook. Driving on the expressway is a skill that I believe all of you will need, especially living in Chicago. Quite often we'll be driving on highways to get places faster. So this is an important chapter that we cover. Some of you have already gotten that opportunity. Hopefully it went well. Some of you will need to start doing that soon, and maybe I'll give you some ideas on where to start this driving towards the end of this presentation. So if you take a look at the screen in front of us, you can see how this chapter breaks down. First, we're going to talk about the different types of highway. Then we're going to talk about getting on the highway. And then thirdly, some strategies for driving on the highway. And then getting off the highway. And then finally, some problems that people experience on the highway. So let's get started. Now, when you think about driving on the expressways, because of the speeds involved in the traffic, as you see in that picture, some people get very stressed out, and that's okay, and that's very natural to feel that way. I like to compare it to going off the high dive at Ridgeland, or the former high dive. You know, you get nervous, you feel those butterflies in your stomach, you kind of fight your way through that, you do it, and then afterwards you're like, it wasn't so bad. And some of you might even say, wow, that was awesome, let's do it again. And so it's very natural to feel stressed about this. Um, but I just want you to know that highways are, in fact, safer. They're designed, statistically, they're safer, and they're designed to be that way for many reasons. And if you look at this list, the one that stands out to me right away is the second one, no intersections. We learned in chapter 10 that intersections are where most crashes occur. So the fact that there's no intersections helps significantly. There's also a large median that separates the two different directions of traffic. And then the next bullet says only vehicles. So there shouldn't be any pedestrians. There shouldn't be any bicycles or other hazards. So for this and other reasons, highways do tend to be safer. If a crash does occur, of course, due to the high speeds, they do tend to be more serious, but there are fewer crashes on the highway. I just want you to know that. Now, the three different types of highway systems that the chapter talks about, we have interstate, U.S. highway, and then the state highway system. Some sources add a fourth called the county highway system, but we're just going to talk about these three. The interstate highway system is the newest highway system. It came about in 1956. This is the type of road that you probably took many times, many different interstates on your way to Florida, for example, or on other road trips around the country. These are high-speed, multi-lane roads. Sometimes they have tolls, sometimes they don't, but they all have controlled access to them. What does that mean? Well, that means you can only get on and off at certain places. And remember, there's no intersections, so where do you get on and off? Those are called interchanges. So interchanges are how you get to and from different interstates. Now, interstates have a red, white, and blue shield, so make sure you know that. And they're numbered in a way that helps us know the direction that they run. So odd numbered streets, and on the bottom you can see those are running north and south. And then east and west, those are even numbered signs. Now, do you know what this one is? You should. It's close to your house. Notice it's an even number. So therefore, this interstate runs east and west, and that would be the Eisenhower Expressway. Now, the U.S. highway system is different. Sometimes it is fast and multi-lanes like interstates, but quite often the U.S. highway system will take you through towns, and you'll have intersections with traffic controls, and there's non-controlled access. You could turn into a gas station, for example, and you'll stop at a red light. And then other times it'll be a two-lane, high-speed rural road. So it varies greatly. These also take you to different states. Notice in 1926 is when they started coming around. And so the interstate kind of replaced the U.S. highway system. Notice the sign in the right corner. So the interstate sign, the U.S. highway sign is a white and black shield, a white shield with black letters, and usually they have a black backing to them as well, like you see in the bottom. Now, the most famous U.S. highway, and some of you may have done a big road trip with this, is Route 66, which takes you from Chicago all the way to California. By the way, look at that picture. Notice what's wrong with that map? The sign is actually an interstate sign, but Route 66 is not an interstate. But the ones around us that you should be aware of is Route 12 and Route 20, and you can see where those take you. So they do go through or near Oak Park. Route 20 actually is Lake Street, or it leads into Lake Street as we go into Oak Park. So these are two that are around Oak Park, and they will take you to different states. Now, the third category is state highway systems, and this is similar to U.S. highways, except they don't take you to other states. So the road types and variations are very similar to U.S. highways. Notice the signs. All right, the signs vary by state. Each state has their own state highway system signs. Can you find Illinois? Find your favorite one now. I like Vermont. Wyoming's got a little bit of character. Now, here are some state highways around Oak Park. These are ones you should definitely know. 64, Illinois 64, it's an even number, so it runs east and west. So which one is that? That would be North Avenue. Route 171, it's right near Costco. Actually, 64 and 171 intersect at Costco, so that's First Avenue. And then we have Route 38, which is Roosevelt Road. That's on the south end of Oak Park. And then that runs east-west. And then on the west side of Oak Park, you have Route 43, which is a north-south odd-numbered street, and that would be Harlem. So you should definitely know. So these are highways, state highways, and as I said earlier, they go through towns many times. Now, interchanges. There are many different types of interchanges that connect interstate highways, and they're identified and named based on what they look like. So the picture in front of you kind of looks like a cloverleaf, and so therefore it is titled or named a cloverleaf interchange. So you have 4 circle ramps that you can get on and off of the interstate highway. Now these two, the one on the upper right, that kind of looks like a diamond interchange. And so what you have here is probably a highway, expressway, that you'll be able to get off of the expressway at a major road like Harlem, for example. And then on the bottom, that kind of looks like a trumpet or a horn of some sort, and that is where an interstate tees or dead ends into another road or highway or freeway. Okay, now the final one is a very complex interchange. It's called a multi-directional or all-directional interchange. And this type of interchange is in very busy metropolitan cities around the country. And these kind of interchanges take cars in many different directions. And it's able to handle a lot of traffic. So a huge flow of cars is able to go in many different directions through an all directional interchange. Now, just for your interest's sake, if you're curious, this is the proposed interchange at 290 in Harlem. So if you know anything about Harlem and 290, it's a very poorly designed and old interchange, and it's high risk. There's left entrance ramps, there's short acceleration lanes. So if you're curious about seeing what a new proposal looks like for that interchange, go ahead and pause the video and take a look at it. You'll see that everything's on the right now. It seems like there's longer acceleration lanes, which is great. So I just thought I'd put that out there for your curious sake. Well, let's move into chapter 16.2. That would be getting on the expressway. All right. So when you get on the expressway, it's always good to have a plan. It's good to always think in advance when you drive. Where am I going? How am I going to get there? What entrances and exits will I take? How long will I need to be on the highway? That kind of thing. So, think it through in advance, and that's a very good skill. Now, in terms of getting on the highway, the first key is to make sure it's an entrance. It is unfortunately increasingly common that people are getting onto highways at exits rather than entrances. And of course, that results in wrong way driving on the expressway, and unfortunately also results in fatalities. So they're not usually as well marked as this picture I have in front of you. So you have to really be careful to look for do not enter and wrong way signs, and just make sure, and if you see them, then do not get on there. So make sure it's actually an entrance. Now there's 3 parts to getting on the expressway. The first part, and in each part you have a job to do. The first part is called the entrance ramp. The second part is called the acceleration lane, and then the third part is called the merging area. So with each part, again, you have a job to do. So the entrance ramp, that's where you first turn to get on the expressway. And so what is your job there? Well, your job there is to look at the conditions of the highway and see what they're like. Assess what it's like on the highway. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it heavy traffic? Is it heavy but moving? Notice the entrance ramp is oftentimes at an angle, as the picture on the right shows you. It can also be a circle, like in a clover leaf. So it needs to, you need to take that at the proper speed, and while you do that, you assess the conditions. Now that moves you onto the acceleration lane. Now sometimes that's separating the entrance ramp and the acceleration lane is a ramp meter, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But an acceleration lane is where it straightens out, and that's where you start to really accelerate and match the speed of traffic on the highway. So that's the key skill. You need to get up to the flow of traffic. That's really where you'll use the information that you gathered on the entrance ramp. So you might have to go from 15 to 55 or 65 miles an hour in just a matter of a few hundred feet. On the other hand, if traffic's really bad and slow, you might have to only go 15, 20 miles an hour. So it all depends. But as you do this on the acceleration lane, you're going to be searching short, quick glances in your mirrors. You're looking for a gap so that you can merge in. So the final part is the merging area. Now, the merging area is not where you have to merge. It's actually the last place to merge. In fact, I would probably recommend not waiting till the last moment, because if you notice, according to the picture, if you don't merge in by the time you get to the merging area, you'll be on the shoulder of the road. So I'd like to get over a little bit before the merging area. I'll use it if I have to, but I don't want to get over too late nor too early. Why wouldn't you want to get over too early? Well, because you may not be going fast enough yet. So do use the acceleration lane to get up to the flow and then get in and before you run out of room. And you can take a look at the picture in the bottom left, and you can see what's going on here. And there's your entrance ramp. And there's your acceleration lane, looking for the gap. And the last chance to get in right there is the merging area. Now, there's a good article on merging. If you're interested, you can type that into your search bar. It's appropriately titled "How to Merge Without Crashing." It's really good. It has some good explanation and pictures if you're interested. Now, some problems that people encounter when trying to merge on the expressway involve things like short acceleration lanes, entrance ramp problems, high dividing walls, and all the all the entrances near Oak Park have some of these problems. So these are some things that you need to be aware of. The first bullet talks about entering the wrong entrance ramp. Now, that's not the same as what we were saying earlier about entering an exit where you're going to go the wrong way on the highway. This is if you get onto, say, Harlem going west, but you want to go in the city. That means you need to go east. So what should you not do? That's first of all what I want to cover. Do not stop and back up on the entrance ramp or the acceleration lane. Don't perform a turnabout on the entrance ramp. What should you do? Well, you should continue onto the highway. You merge safely into the expressway, get off at the first possible exit, and then fix your mistake and head east. That's important. Another thing that happens on entrance ramp situations is a ramp meter that we mentioned earlier. So if you take a look at the picture, there's a ramp meter here, and what do you have to do if there's a ramp meter? Well, you need to obey the stoplights, just like any traffic signal. These traffic signals are low to the ground, and they are only red and green, so there's no yellow lights. So what is the purpose of the ramp meter? The purpose of the ramp meter is to break up the flow of cars onto the highway. They don't want 10 cars trying to merge at once, especially during high traffic times. So quite often, ramp meters are only turned on during rush hour in the morning and in the afternoon. So you stop at the red light, it'll be red for just a few seconds, and then you'll have a green light, and then you'll be able to enter the acceleration lane. Other problems that happen with merging, short acceleration lanes. Around Harlem, First Avenue, 25th, these are all very short, just a few hundred feet long. You don't have much time to get up to the flow and merge in. It is not uncommon in many highways to have acceleration lanes that are a half a mile or more in length. So that's typically how they are, but sometimes they're very short. Also, it's as a reminder, it's important not to slow or stop on the acceleration lane. Uh, Unless there's bumper to bumper traffic, that might happen, but you got to keep moving. If you have to slow, of course, flash your brake lights, communicate to the car behind you, and be aware of that rear zone in case the car behind you is not paying attention. Heavy traffic is also a concern, especially if traffic is moving. That makes it the skill more challenging to find that gap and to move and to merge in. Left entrance ramps. We have left entrance ramps at Harlem and Austin, and there's some downtown as well. They're not that common, but they are higher risk. Why? Can you think of it? Left entrances are entering the fastest side of the expressway. It's also harder to look over your right shoulder for that blind spot check. So left entrances have more risk than right entrances. And lastly, I wrote uncooperative drivers. Merging is a cooperative effort. We need to work together with cars that are merging. So if you're on the expressway in the right lane and there's cars merging, you need to work with them. And just like if you're merging, you want someone to work with you. And so a good rule of thumb is it's called you go, we go. And basically, it's something you learned in kindergarten. Take turns. We have to work together to merge safely. There's a couple signs there at the bottom. Make sure you know the difference between those two. The one on the right is the one you typically see when you merge on the highway. The one on the left is a merge situation, except there's two lanes that occur after the merge. So it's technically not a merge. So let's just conclude this by talking about steps for entering. It bears repeating. Make sure it's an entrance. Look for those signs. And if you see those signs, don't go. The steps for entering can be summarized with a good acronym called SAFE. SAFE stands for signal, accelerate, find a gap, and enter. More specifically, though, let's just review. Step one, assess the highway conditions. Where does that happen? On the entrance ramp, as we said earlier. If there's a ramp meter, you deal with that, and then you're on the acceleration lane. So what do you do in the acceleration lane? Accelerate to match the flow of cars on the expressway. As you do that you are also signaling. You are checking your mirrors and blind spot. You're searching for the gap. And fourthly, you're deciding about that gap. Sometimes you have to adjust your speed to get to the gap. So sometimes you get up to the flow of traffic and then you go a little faster to merge in. Sometimes you might have to drop back to a gap. Not a huge adjustment of speed, but a little adjustment. And then lastly, fifth, inch the wheel slightly to merge. Cancel that signal. You shouldn't turn the wheel much at all. It should be very gradual drifting into that new lane. And probably the most important thing I could say is to reestablish your following distance. Quite often you have to give up your your space cushion to merge into the highway. So get up to the flow, merge in, and then reestablish your following distance.
Statistically, one of the safest places to travel is on the freeway. But getting on and off can be pretty dangerous. So today I'll share a few tips on how to safely merge and exit off of the freeway. I'm still scanning the intersection to make it clear of red light runners and entering my on-ramp. I can see there are two lanes, so I'm checking to my right. I don't see any cars coming in from the right merging in. Up ahead, I am going to have to merge. So I'm going to get my signal on early and getting my speed up to 60 miles per hour. And I'm checking the gap in traffic early and often. So I see a gap behind me, I'm going to fit right in, and I'm on the freeway. Once I'm finally on the freeway, check my mirrors one more time and cancel my signal. Now that I'm on the freeway, I can increase my following distance from the car in front of me. Make sure I've got a good 3 seconds at least in following distance.
All right, chapter 16.3. This is strategies for driving on the highway. So the first thing the chapter talks about is IPDE, which you should remember from chapter 5. Does IPDE change on the expressway? Well, I would say yes. There are many similarities, but it also can change. First thing that I would say is important about identifying on the highway is you got to look far down the road. We need to identify things sooner because of the speeds involved and the traffic involved. We need to look farther into our target area, and we need to see things earlier. And highways are designed to help with that. They design them with a lot of straight stretches, so that you can see farther. But it's very critical that you look far in advance. And one of the biggest things that you're looking for, and I would say identify also unique characteristics for the highway. And one of the unique characteristics for the highway is the color red. It's so important that if this picture on the right happens, that you see it as soon as possible. You do not want to react late to this situation. Um, you also want to identify, any aggressive drivers that weave in and out of traffic that are going much faster than the flow of traffic. Also want to kind of pay attention to people who aren't paying attention, so distracted drivers. You also want to identify trucks. We learned how trucks are high risk. There's no benefit to being near a truck, and also avoid being stuck in between them. Trucks provide additional risk on the highway, and there are a lot of trucks on the expressway. Predict. Predicting is the same. We're predicting the worst. We're predicting points of conflict. One of the big things that you will predict is that the traffic will slow. And if you are looking for the red lights and predicting that there will be a slowdown, it will help avoid this situation on the left here. You don't want to ever brake in traffic, especially on the highway like that. If you brake like that, you will be hit from behind. So you need to predict the slowdown. You're also going to predict conflict at merge points. So as you drive in the expressway, if you're in the right lane especially, you're looking for merging, you're looking for interchanges, and you're predicting those slowdowns in those lanes. Deciding and executing. Decisions need to be made quicker. You need to think ahead, as I said earlier, and you need to, be thinking in advance, but also make quicker decisions. Signaling early will help, but probably the two most important skills for executing are things that we've talked about all semester long. Number one, manage your space well, and it starts with a 3-second following distance. You got to have a good following distance on the expressway, and that's going to allow everything else to go better. And then we'll let that determine how fast we drive. That's called managing your speed. So managing your space and speed are so critical. IPDE is just more important. The consequences of not paying attention and not thinking through the predictions and not practicing safe executions is more tragic. So this is just more urgent. Now, lane choice on the highway. There could be 3 to 4 lanes on the expressway, and it's important that you know what lane you do what in. The overall strategy for lane choice is to pick a lane and stay in it. I can't emphasize that enough. High risk drivers move in and out of lanes, so pick a safe lane and only change lanes when you have to. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But pay attention to the signs. That can help you identify which lane that you need to be in. As you can see, Austin, you'll need to exit on the left. Same with Harlem in that picture. So if you needed to get off at Austin, you would not want to be in the right lane. Now, the left side of the highway, the left lane, is for faster traffic and passing traffic. Some advantages is that it tends to flow pretty well, but it's very fast. There is typically a built-in space cushion, meaning the shoulder in that left lane, so that's an advantage as well. The center lane, it does also tend to flow well. The problem with the center lane, in my opinion, is that there's no space cushions. You can have cars changing lanes into your lane from both sides, and you don't have any built-in space cushion. So the center lane, while some people prefer that, can have additional risks. Now the right lane, that's for slower traffic. That's for cars driving the highway speed limit, probably. There could be more slowdowns in that right lane due to merging cars. But you also have a space cushion built in there on the shoulder typically. So there's some ideas to think about as far as what lane to go to drive in. Now, sometimes you will find reversible lanes on the expressway. usually the ones that head into and out of major cities like Chicago. Um, it's important that you know these arrow overhead signal lights because they can indicate what's going to happen on a lane. So the green arrow, of course, means the lane is open. Sometimes it's used, on one lane only. Sometimes it's in all the lanes. The yellow X, or sometimes it's an arrow, as the picture suggests, that means the lane is going to be closing soon. And so that's definitely something you would want to notice and then move into the next lane. And then finally, the red X, that means the lane is closed. And so you should not be driving. If you're driving in a lane, there's a red X above the lane you're in, you're going the wrong way. This is common in major metropolitan areas like Chicago. You do see sometimes high occupancy toll lanes or carpool lanes. They are indicated by that white diamond that you see. Chicago, I don't believe, has any yet. We will move in that direction, I'm sure, in the future. But if you see a white diamond in the lane you're in, that on a road trip, that means that you're in a carpool lane, and that typically means you must have 2 or more occupants in it. I'm not going to show this video, but there's some interesting information if you want to take a look. You'll probably be able to find that video on Google. It's the Illinois Tollway Smart Road on the Jane Addams Tollway. Speed on the highways, that's an important thing to consider. There are several different types of speed. We first of all have the speed limit that's posted, and these pictures show the speed limit posted. The speed limit posted is the safe speed, it's the legal speed, that is required under ideal circumstances. And you can see in those pictures, in one picture, the speed limit is 55, and the other it's 80 miles an hour. So it can vary greatly depending on the state you're in and the type of road you're in. And just remember, legally, you are supposed to drive at the speed limit. The minimum speed limit is the lowest legal speed limit you can drive. I would recommend that if you're going to be driving the minimum speed limits, probably you shouldn't be on the highway. The cars are driving oftentimes much faster than the speed limit. And if you're going 45 on the major interstate highway, it could be very dangerous. But if you're driving the minimum or posted speed limits, you definitely want to be in that right lane, which is reserved for slower traffic. Now, the common speed, well, that would be the speed that most people are driving. So the common speed can be faster than the speed limit. That would be the flow speed, so that's good to be aware of. And then lastly, the safe speed. Now, I think the safe speed is what we should drive. So what is the safe speed? The safe speed is the speed that the conditions or situation allow. So it could be related to weather, it could be related to traffic, but it often is related to how much space is around your car. So these are some things to consider about driving on the highway. Blind spots on the highway, we never want to drive in people's blind spots. We don't want to, we don't want people in our blind spots either. That's poorly managing our space cushion. So it's important that we are aware of the zones around our car and that we avoid driving in blind spots. We also want to avoid tailgating. Tailgating is high risk driving. Don't be one of these people that you see. That is a collision trap. That is a collision waiting to happen. So certainly don't be that person yourself. But if someone is tailgating you on the highway, which could happen, allow them to pass. Coasting for a couple seconds oftentimes is all it takes. But if you're in that right lane, you shouldn't have too much of an issue with people tailgating you for long. They'll pass you. Changing lanes on the highway is another key skill. Besides merging, I would say this is also the second risky thing that we have to practice doing. As I said earlier, avoid changing lanes too often. Unnecessary changing lanes or frequent changing lanes is high risk and leads to collisions. One of the things that makes changing lanes on the expressway so risky is that there's multiple lanes. And if you look at the picture on the right, you can see what that risk involves. 2 people going for the same spot at the same time. So it's important that we're aware of our mirrors and the blind spots when we change lanes. But be careful for the lane that's 2 lanes over, because there could be a lane trying to merge to the same point as you. But make sure that you keep flowing, push that gas so that you keep moving with traffic. Also, don't forget about your front zone in case there's red brake lights in front of you when you're trying to change lanes. It is illegal to change lanes or use the shoulder or median to pass or change lanes, so make sure you don't do that. But this is definitely one of the risks. You do need to know how to change lanes on the highway, but just don't do it too much. Okay, and there's at the bottom there's some good reasons to change lanes. So passing, this is similar to changing lanes, except you're going past another car. Now, the median in the middle of the highway is very helpful for helping that passing is safer, and typically it is, but it's not always safer. A good rule of thumb is to pass on the left. You typically do not want to pass on the right. Some states, some situations, it is illegal. Also, be mindful. When you change lanes or pass, you got to use your mirrors effectively. There could be a car coming quickly from behind you on the expressway going much faster than the flow of cars, and you need to see that. And if you do see a car going really quickly, like the picture on the right, do not make that lane change. Wait till the car passes, and then you would change lanes. All right, chapter 16.4, getting off the expressway. So, in terms of driving on the expressway and then getting off the expressway, it's important to have a plan. It's important that you know where you're going to be getting off. And like we talked about earlier, think about this in advance. You need to get into the lane that is near the exit as soon as possible when you know it's coming up. Don't wait till the last second. If you wait till the last second, you're going to have to make several lane changes right before exiting, and that's highly risky. So I would recommend being in the correct lane to exit the highway at least a mile in advance, even earlier though, especially in high traffic situations. Now there's two different parts to getting off the expressway. The first part is called the deceleration lane, and the second part is called the exit ramp. The deceleration lane, as it's appropriately titled, is where you slow down. Notice we didn't say slow down in the lane on the highway. So you want to do your best to keep your speed with a little bit of gas pressure in that last lane. And then when you get off the third lane into the deceleration lane, take your foot off the gas and start coasting. So keep your speed in the flow lane, then coast and start to decelerate gradually in the deceleration lane. That's really important. The deceleration lane leads to the exit ramp, and so that's the road that will take you off the highway. And when you're on the exit ramp, the thing that you need to be thinking of is, I'm going to have to stop. I want you to be ready for slow speed limits too. So look for that speed limit sign as soon as possible. If you see a speed limit sign around 25 miles an hour, especially, or even lower, it's most likely a cloverleaf interchange. You know what that means, right? That means it's going to be a sharp circle. If you hit a sharp circle exit ramp at too great a speed, you could end up off the exit ramp into the ditch. So it's really important that as you use the deceleration lane, that you start to look for a speed limit sign to see how fast is the maximum speed you can drive in the exit ramp. If by some reason you are not in the correct lane and you miss the exit ramp that you want to take, never stop on the shoulder of the road and back up to get off the highway. I've seen this happen before. Do not ever do that. Like we said earlier, continue on the expressway and get off at the next exit. It happens from time to time, but if you're thinking in advance and scanning far down the roadway, this will not, and paying attention to the road signs, this won't happen very much. And like I said earlier, when you get off a highway, predict there will be a traffic control, typically a stop sign or a stop light, sometimes a yield sign, but it very rarely just moves into a lane where you don't have to stop. Some exit ramp problems. One thing you see often in Chicago with the amount of traffic is on the left, you see backups at exit ramps. So especially during rush hour and very busy streets like Harlem, you sometimes see traffic backing up from the ramp through the deceleration lane and then onto the traffic in the right lane. So be looking for that far ahead. If you see a lot of red, especially in the right lane, you could, change lanes if you're not exiting. Or even if you were planning an exit, you could take the next exit instead. That might be a safer option than actually stopping on the highway. Another thing that you see on the expressway is exits that are also shared with entrance ramps. So the picture on the right shows a picture of kind of what happens there. That can produce a number of collisions by people having to work together to merge and to exit. So the general rule there is that if you are exiting, you should be merging behind the cars that are entering. So you're slowing and going behind the car that is accelerating and entering the highway. One other thing that I want to point out to you, and this is common around here, especially I'm thinking of 25th Avenue and First Avenue. There's a lot of them actually. There's no deceleration lanes at some of the exits on the Eisenhower. So if there's no um, deceleration lanes, and if it leads to a cloverleaf interchange, that could be highly risky. My suggestion is to partially use the shoulder of the road if you have to get your car slowing so that you don't slow in traffic and that you don't hit the exit ramp too fast.
An important thing to think about when you're exiting is to look really far ahead and spot where your exit's going to be. Is it a mile away? Is it half a mile? Because you have to make a lane change to get into the correct lane. So look to see if it's just a normal exit or potentially if it's an exit-only lane where you're forced to exit. A lot of times, some people make last-minute decisions to get into or out of an exit-only lane. So keep your eyes open when you're exiting. All right, here's my exit. I'm going to put my signal on, mirror, over the shoulder. Make sure no one's coming around me. I'm going to keep my speed up. When I'm on the off ramp, I can begin to slow down, check my rearview mirror, look for conflicts, cancel my signal if I'm established in the off ramp. Anytime you're exiting, look really far ahead to see what happens at the end of the ramp. Is it a stoplight? Is it a yield sign? That sort of thing. So I'm going to take a right, signal mirror over the shoulder. It looks like I'm going to have a yield sign to my right. So I need to be really careful coming off the freeway. You're used to high speeds, so sometimes you can get velocitation, which means you get comfortable going so fast that when you get on the slower speeds, you tend to speed because you don't realize how fast you're going. So watch out for that as you get off the freeway.
Speaking of velocitations, chapter 16.5, we're almost done here. Some highway problems and features that occur. The first one that is identified is called highway hypnosis. And as the picture of the cat illustrates, highway hypnosis is a state of kind of being out of it. It's similar to cognitive or driver inattention that we learned about from chapter 8, a state of not paying attention. And this can happen when you drive on the expressway for a long time. So on a road trip, this can happen. And what it results in is you feeling kind of tired, drowsy, not being alert or attentive. So if you go on a road trip and you feel these symptoms, it's important that you don't continue driving like this. That would be a good time for you to take a break, maybe stop at a rest area, take a nap, stretch, do some sort of movement, get some blood pumping, anything that can help to alleviate the feelings and symptoms of highway hypnosis. Now, velocitation also can occur when you drive for a long period of time at a constant speed. And what happens when you're on the highway and driving at a fast speed for a long period of time, it doesn't feel fast anymore. And your speed will increase slowly but surely over time. And all of a sudden, you're doing 5 miles faster than you were earlier, and then 10 miles an hour faster than you were earlier. So be mindful of that. The other way you see it is when you get off the expressway. When you get off the expressway, all of a sudden, driving 35 miles an hour seems really, really slow. So you have to be careful to guard your speed and be mindful of how fast you're going when you get off the expressway. Another thing that is important to be aware of is disabled vehicles on the highway. Um, you know, just being a disabled vehicle on the expressway with cars driving by you at a high rate of speed is very dangerous. Sometimes you'll see people changing tires on the side of the road or waiting in their car. These are high risk situations. It's not something that you want to do or be in if you can avoid it. So, as you're driving on the expressway, if you start to notice that your car is showing some signs or symptoms of distress, maybe it's making some weird noises, maybe the engine's sputtering, anything like that. But at the first sign of trouble, it's important that you evaluate around your car and look to see where you can go quickly to get out of traffic. We want to be as far off the road as possible if you have to abandon or leave the road as you drive on the expressway. If you leave the road, get as far off as you can. And if you can't, I don't think it's very safe to stay in your car. Try staying in your car is a good option with your seatbelt on if you can get pretty far off the road. But sometimes the shoulders are very narrow. And in that case, it might be better to actually get out of the car. Obviously, you don't ever want to stand in traffic. If you can and if it's safe, you could raise your hood. What is that? That's a sign of distress. But most importantly, be safe and be careful if this happens. It's much better to get off the highway before you disable your car than anywhere near the highway. So be mindful of these things. And then lastly, something that I think we need to just quickly discuss is called Scott's Law. This is an Illinois law that was enacted several years ago. On the left side there, you can see there's a description of the law. It's also called the Move Over Law. But basically, just to quickly summarize it, if you approach any emergency vehicles, fire engine, ambulance, police cars, if you approach them, also, that would include construction and road workers. So if you approach anyone abandoned on the shoulder of the road or any emergency vehicles, you got to slow down, but more importantly, change lanes if you can. That is the law. Obviously, you don't want to make an aggressive, dangerous lane change, but if you can scan down the road and see an emergency vehicle well in advance, you should be able to easily change lanes. Notice on the right side, there's some information about the penalties for individuals who fail to do this, up to a $10,000 fine, 2-year suspension of driving privileges. So this is a big deal, and hopefully you understand the reason for doing this. Go ahead and read that information about Scott's Law. All right, well, that's it. That's the whole chapter. So hopefully you learned some things and that you're moving on being ready for the test that will happen on Thursday. Good luck with the rest of your chapter. And always, if you have any questions about the material or any of the work assigned for this chapter, reach out to your teacher through Google Classroom or through an email, and they would be happy to answer those questions. Hope everyone's doing well, and we'll see you on the highway. Take care.